Alien Woman was the galaxy's most wanted assassin, until a human gave her a home. The galaxy was a vast place, filled with countless stars, planets, and civilizations. Some were peaceful, trading knowledge and culture. Others were dangerous, filled with violence and war. Among these countless worlds, the name Vela whispered fear. To many, she was nothing more than a shadow, a story told to frighten those who dared cross the wrong people. To others, she was a living nightmare, a woman who moved faster than most eyes could follow, struck without warning, and disappeared before anyone could respond. Vela had earned her reputation over years, traveling across systems, completing missions that most would refuse. Assassination, espionage, sabotage, she excelled at all of them. She had no alliances, no home, no one she could call a friend. Trust was dangerous and loyalty was a weakness. Every life she spared or helped had been by her own calculation, and every bond she once thought permanent had ended in betrayal. It was better this way. Better to be alone than to depend on someone who would sooner see her dead. The current mission, however, was different. The job had started simple enough: retrieve data from a mining station on the edge of the Scifi cluster. The location was remote, far from patrol fleets and almost abandoned. Vela had expected minimal resistance. She had expected ease. She did not expect the trap. The moment she stepped onto the station's observation deck, the lights flickered and a soft hum filled the air. Vela froze. Her instincts screamed that something was wrong. Her hand went to the small energy blade at her belt, but it was already too late. Panels in the floor slid open and sharp metal tendrils shot upward. She dodged with speed that few could match, rolling across the floor. Still, one tendril grazed her shoulder, leaving a shallow but painful cut. Cursing under her breath in a language no human could understand, she sprang toward the nearest exit. But the doors had locked automatically. She had walked right into a carefully planned ambush. Vela had faced traps before, but this one was clever, too clever for a simple pirate crew. Whoever had designed this wanted her alive, or perhaps wanted to send a message. She moved quickly, leaping from platform to platform, avoiding the snapping metal. Sweat ran down her face, though it was more from focus than fear. She had faced worse, and she knew she would survive. But the realization hit her as she ducked behind a support beam. She was being followed, and it wasn't just automated defenses. Her pursuers were silent, careful, and fast. Vela's eyes narrowed. Whoever they were, they had underestimated her. But even the best could be wounded. She felt the sharp sting in her shoulder, and for a moment she allowed herself to slow just slightly to assess her options. There in the corner of the observation deck was a vent system, barely large enough for her to slip through. It was a tight fit, but it would give her a chance to escape. She crawled through the narrow metal tunnel, scraping her side against jagged edges, ignoring the sting of pain. Her mind raced, not panic but calculation. She needed a safe place, somewhere no one would look for her. Somewhere far from the eyes of bounty hunters, spies, and other enemies she had collected over the years. Hours later, Vela emerged from the vent into a strange sight. She had chosen her path blindly, hoping it would lead her somewhere remote. Instead, she found herself on a planet she had never visited. Its surface was rough and rocky, red dust covering the landscape. But in the distance, she saw something unusual: structures, buildings, and lights. A settlement, people, a community. Her first instinct was to leave. Approach a civilization, and she risked discovery, questioning, or worse, attack. She was wounded, and hiding in plain sight was dangerous, but something in her told her she had no other choice. She was too weak to leave, and there was a faint warmth to the lights of the settlement, a sense of life she hadn't encountered in years. Vela crept closer, staying in the shadows, observing. The settlement was small but well-maintained. People moved about with purpose, working together, carrying supplies, and speaking in a soft, melodic language. She could see children laughing, running through dusty streets without fear. She felt a strange pull in her chest, a feeling she hadn't known in a long time: curiosity. Perhaps even hope. She spotted a man who seemed different from the others. He was older than most, with a gentle posture and hands rough from work. He was carrying a crate of supplies, moving carefully but confidently. Something about the way he surveyed the settlement gave him authority, but not in a harsh way. Vela's instincts, honed through years of hunting and survival, told her he could be trusted, or at least he wouldn't attack immediately. Her decision made, Vela moved closer to the settlement under the cover of night. She kept low, avoiding the dim lights until she reached the outskirts of the small town. She had almost made it when a loose rock slipped under her foot, snapping loudly against the dusty ground. "Who's there?" a voice called out, calm but alert. Vela froze, her body instinctively tensing. A beam of light swept across the ground, then landed on her. She expected screams, anger, weapons drawn. Instead, the man from earlier stepped forward, his hands raised, not in aggression but in greeting. "You're hurt," he said quietly, scanning the cut on her shoulder. "Come, you can't stay out here." Vela's instincts screamed at her to flee. Humans were unpredictable, fragile, and weak. She had survived because she had trusted no one, yet something about the way this man spoke with no accusation or fear made her hesitate. She was not in control, but she was curious. "I said come," he repeated. "You don't have to explain, you just need help." Her mind calculated the risks. A trap, perhaps, but she was bleeding, exhausted, and needed shelter. Slowly, almost reluctantly, she allowed him to guide her to a small home at the edge of the settlement. Inside, it was simple. Wooden furniture, a small cooking area, and a bed that looked uncomfortable by galactic standards, but inviting nonetheless. The man, whose name she learned was Jonas, tended to her wound with care. He cleaned it, applied a healing salve, and wrapped it gently. "You should rest," Jonas said. "You've been through a lot, no one will bother you here, not tonight." Vela didn't respond. Words had never been her strength, but she studied him, noticing his patience, his calm presence, and the lack of fear in his eyes. Humans were strange creatures, weak, fragile, and yet resilient. She had underestimated them. That night, as she lay on the simple bed, Vela felt something she hadn't felt in years: safety. Not complete, not perfect, but enough to let her body relax for the first time in a long while. The galaxy had been cruel, untrusting, and cold, but here, on this small, dusty planet, among humans who were simple and kind, she felt a glimmer of peace. The next morning, she awoke to the sound of children laughing outside, the sunlight streaming through the small windows. Jonas was already up, preparing a simple breakfast of bread and a stew of vegetables she didn't recognize. "You have to eat," he said, placing a bowl in front of her. "You can't think or fight on an empty stomach." Vela studied the food, the hands that prepared it, the eyes that watched her with quiet concern. She had eaten many meals across the galaxy, most of them hurried, alone, or in the company of fear. This meal was different. She ate, slowly, cautiously, but she ate. Days passed. Vela began to move more freely around the settlement, though she stayed vigilant. She observed the humans at work, their simple lives, their clever solutions to problems that she would have expected more advanced technology to solve. They repaired broken tools with ingenuity, coordinated tasks without hierarchy, and faced challenges with determination rather than fear. One day, while helping Jonas repair a damaged water pump, Vela realized she was learning something new, not about weapons or tactics, but about people, about trust, about cooperation, about strength that didn't come from violence. Vela had survived the galaxy by herself for years, but here she saw a different kind of survival, a survival built on unity, on intelligence, and on heart. For the first time in a long time, she wondered if she didn't just want to survive, but to belong. And as she looked at the small humans bustling around her, she realized that this strange planet, with its dust, laughter, and simple kindness, might just be the first place in the galaxy where she could finally call home. The sun had barely risen over the red dust of the small planet, and Vela was already awake. Her shoulder throbbed slightly from the cut she had received during her escape from the trap, but it was nothing she couldn't manage. Still, the comfort of the small bed and the calm of the settlement made her hesitate before moving. She had spent years traveling across the galaxy, sleeping in abandoned stations, dark alleys, and cramped spaceships, but never in a place where she felt safe. Jonas had already been awake, tending to the small garden near his home. The plants were simple, root vegetables, hardy greens, but they thrived despite the harsh climate. He glanced at her and gave a small nod. "Morning," he said, his voice calm and warm. "Sleep well?" Vela did not answer immediately. Words were difficult for her, and she wasn't sure she needed to speak. Instead, she observed the way Jonas moved, careful, precise, yet relaxed. Humans were strange creatures, fragile yet determined, weak yet clever. She wondered what it would be like to live like this every day without the constant threat of death. "I need to walk," she finally said, her voice low and even. "Of course," Jonas replied. "Stay close to the settlement." The outskirts are safe, but the dust storms can come quickly. Vela stepped outside, her boots crunching softly against the red soil. The settlement was small but vibrant. Smoke rose from chimneys, children laughed as they chased each other, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. No one hurried, no one shouted. Life here moved with purpose but without fear. For someone like Vela, who had spent years moving from mission to mission, always hiding, always calculating, it was almost impossible to believe. She walked toward the edge of the settlement, keeping to the shadows. She wanted to understand this place, to see its strengths and weaknesses. Even here, far from the galaxy's chaos, danger could arrive. Pirates, bounty hunters, or worse could appear at any time, and yet the humans were not afraid. They worked together, solved problems as a team, and faced challenges with determination rather than panic. Vela crouched near a water pump, watching a group of humans carry heavy barrels from a nearby reservoir. One of them, a boy no older than 12, struggled under the weight. Instead of scolding him, the others adjusted their positions, lifting the barrel together. The boy's eyes lit up with relief, and a smile spread across his face. Vela felt something unfamiliar in her chest, a small warmth, a sense of admiration. Humans were clever, yes, but they were also united. That unity, it was dangerous in its own way. Returning to Jonas's home, she found him repairing a broken solar panel. The task seemed simple to him, yet his hands moved with precision, adjusting wires and tightening screws. Vela had never seen someone repair technology with such care, combining both knowledge and patience. Most humans she had encountered were either reckless or timid when it came to machines. Jonas was neither. "You'll need to eat something," he said, handing her a piece of bread. "You've been moving constantly. Your body needs energy." Vela took the bread, inspecting it carefully. She had eaten many meals during her missions, nutrient packs, protein cubes, sometimes food stolen from stations, but this felt different. Simple, honest. No chemicals, no preservatives, no artificial enhancements, just food. She took a bite, then another. It was satisfying. She hadn't realized how hungry she truly was, not just for nutrition, but for normalcy. The act of eating without fear, without watching the shadows for potential threats, was strange, and yet comforting. Over the next few days, Vela began to settle into the rhythm of the settlement. She helped with small tasks, carrying supplies, repairing tools, tending to minor mechanical problems, but she remained cautious. Her instincts, honed through years of survival, told her that trust was dangerous. And yet, each interaction with the humans chipped away at her skepticism. One evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Vela watched the children play. They ran across the dusty fields, laughing, throwing small stones at distant targets. Their joy was pure, untainted by fear or danger. For a moment, Vela wondered what her own childhood had been like. The answer was a shadowed memory, filled with harsh lessons and survival. She had no childhood like this, no laughter like theirs, and yet she found herself envying it. Jonas approached her, carrying 2 bowls of stew. He handed one to her without speaking, then sat down on a low wall. "You're quiet," he said. Vela shrugged. "Observing." "You observe a lot," he replied, a hint of a smile on his face. "I like that. You notice things others don't." Vela stared at him, unsure how to respond. It was strange to hear a human speak of noticing things as a compliment rather than a threat. In her world, noticing things meant spotting danger, weaknesses, or betrayal. Here, it seemed to mean something different. "You're learning," Jonas continued. "About us, I mean about life here. It's not perfect. We have our struggles, but we survive together." Vela turned the words over in her mind. Survive together. She had survived alone for so long that the idea of surviving with others felt alien, and yet it was tempting. The thought of not being hunted, of not being alone, of having people who cared, it was a dangerous temptation. That night, Vela patrolled the perimeter of the settlement, not because she feared the humans, but because she feared the galaxy. Danger could come from anywhere, and she would not let it reach this place. Her senses were sharp, her movements precise. She listened to the wind through the rocks, felt the vibrations of distant creatures in the dust, and scanned the horizon for anything unusual. It was then she noticed them, small lights far beyond the settlement. She crouched, analyzing ships, not commercial, not cargo. These were military or mercenary vessels, scanning for signs of life, and judging by their approach, they were looking for one person, her. Vela's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from calculation. She could leave. She could vanish into the stars as she had done so many times before. But the thought of leaving the humans, of abandoning them to whatever these hunters might bring, stayed her hand. She returned to Jonas's home at dawn, her mind racing. She explained nothing. Words were not necessary, but Jonas understood. He did not question, did not panic. He simply nodded and began preparations. Over the next hours, the humans of the settlement worked quietly, following Vela's guidance. They set simple traps, not deadly but effective, using their knowledge of the terrain. Thorny plants, pits hidden by dust, makeshift alarms made from metal and string. Vela directed them, taught them how to move quietly, how to mislead the hunters. The humans learned quickly. Their strength was not in firepower, but in intelligence, adaptability, and teamwork. As the day turned to night, Vela realized something remarkable. The humans were not afraid. They were cautious, yes, but not paralyzed by fear. They trusted her guidance, and more importantly, they trusted each other. For someone who had lived in shadows for years, this trust was almost unbearable to witness. And yet, it inspired her. She watched Jonas move among his people, giving advice, encouragement, and support. His leadership was quiet, almost invisible, yet effective. The humans looked to him not because they feared him, but because they respected him. Vela understood in that moment why this settlement thrived where others failed. Strength alone did not keep them alive. Unity, cleverness, and compassion did. That night, as the twin moons rose over the dusty horizon, Vela felt something she had never felt before. She was not just surviving, she was part of something larger, a community. A family in a way she had never known, but the galaxy would not wait. She could hear the distant hum of the approaching ships, their scanners probing for life, their systems designed to locate one target. Vela's mind sharpened, her instincts returning. She would face this danger not alone, but with these humans, these fragile, clever, unafraid humans who had already shown her a glimpse of hope. For the first time in years, Vela was not just running. She was preparing to fight. And not just for herself, but for them. And in that quiet, tense moment, as the stars sparkled overhead, she realized that perhaps, just perhaps, this small settlement on a dusty planet could be more than a refuge. It could be the beginning of something greater, a place where even a shadow like her could find belonging. The galaxy might have hunted her for years, but here, among humans who trusted, cared, and fought together, Vela saw a different kind of power. A power she could respect. A power she could join. And as the first light of the moons touched the settlement, she made a silent vow. No matter what the galaxy sent, she would protect this place. The red dust of the small planet had settled in quiet layers across the settlement, but the calm was only an illusion. From the edge of the horizon, faint lights appeared in the darkness, small, fast-moving, deliberate. Vela watched from a rocky outcrop above the village, her sharp eyes narrowing. They were scouts, not just ordinary ships, but well-equipped, precise, and deadly. Someone knew she was here. The humans of the settlement, still unaware of the approaching danger, moved through their morning routines. Children chased each other through the dusty streets, adults worked on repairs, and smoke rose lazily from chimneys. Vela's chest tightened. She had survived countless ambushes and deadly missions across the galaxy, but she could not allow anyone here to be hurt. These humans had shown her trust, kindness, and a sense of purpose she had never known. They had given her a home, and now she had to protect it. Returning to Jonas's small house, Vela moved quickly but quietly. Jonas was in the garden checking on the plants. When he looked up, he immediately noticed her expression. "They're coming," Vela said, her voice low and urgent. Jonas's eyes widened slightly, but he did not panic. "How many?" he asked calmly. "Too many to fight directly," Vela replied. "But we don't need to. We have something they don't, this place and its people." Jonas nodded slowly. "Then we use it." Vela spent the next few hours teaching the humans how to use their environment to their advantage. She did not need weapons. They had very few. But she showed them clever tricks to mislead, slow down, and confuse the enemy. They dug shallow pits and covered them with dust and sticks. They tied bells to wires to create noise traps. They moved large rocks to create narrow pathways and dead ends, turning the settlement into a maze. The humans learned quickly. Unlike the professional mercenaries she had faced, these people did not rely on fear or brute force. They relied on intelligence, cooperation, and adaptability. And Vela could see that every human contributed ideas, improving upon her suggestions, making the defenses stronger than she had imagined. As evening fell, the first of the scout ships approached. They skimmed low over the dusty hills, scanning for signs of life. Vela crouched on the ridge above the settlement, signaling to the humans below. One by one, they took their positions, moving silently through the traps and false paths they had prepared. The scouts landed at the edge of the settlement, stepping out cautiously. They were tall, armored, and armed with energy rifles. They expected resistance, perhaps even a fight. But the humans were nowhere in sight. Only traps waited for them, small pitfalls, tripwires, and scattered noises designed to mislead. The first scout stepped into a dust-covered pit, tumbling forward with a surprised shout. The others paused, checking their surroundings. A wire snapped somewhere to the left, a bell ringing softly. They turned, thinking they had found the humans, but only saw shadows and empty streets. Vela's strategy worked perfectly. The humans had turned the village into a puzzle the enemy could not immediately solve. Inside her small home, Jonas watched from a window. He smiled at the efficiency of the traps. "They think they're in control," he said quietly, "but we're controlling the battlefield." Vela's eyes never left the horizon. She knew this was only the beginning. The scouts were only the first wave. The main force would arrive soon. But already the humans were showing her something remarkable. Fear did not control them. They were calm, focused, and coordinated. Each action built upon the next, creating a rhythm that even seasoned mercenaries could not easily counter. Night fell completely and the main fleet arrived. Large ships descended, powerful engines shaking the ground. They scanned the settlement with bright lights and advanced sensors, looking for Vela. She watched from above, her heart steady, her mind calculating. She had faced overwhelming forces before, but never with such companions at her side. The humans moved quickly, following the plan Vela had created. Some led decoy patrols, using shadows and light to confuse the sensors. Others hid in the buildings, ready to spring small distractions. The settlement itself became a weapon, a maze, a shield, and a trap all at once. The enemy stepped cautiously into the settlement, scanning for life signs. They expected to find a single target, a solitary assassin who relied on stealth and fear. Instead, they found clever obstacles and coordinated movements. Rocks fell in their path, wires tripped their feet, and false sounds lured them in circles. Their advanced technology could not account for human creativity. Vela joined the defense, moving silently between vantage points. She did not attack recklessly. She guided the humans, giving signals and directions that kept the enemy off balance. She admired their focus. Even under pressure, they did not panic. Each human performed their role with intelligence and determination. One small group of children, led by their older siblings, moved through the narrow pathways she had helped create, carrying buckets of dust and sand. At the right moment, they dumped the sand in front of the enemy's sensors, creating false heat signatures. The soldiers paused, confused, adjusting their scanners, and Vela could not help but feel a flicker of pride. These humans were resourceful. They were clever. And they were brave. Jonas moved among the defenders, coordinating their efforts. His calm voice guided them, keeping everyone in rhythm. Vela realized that this man, simple as he seemed, possessed a quiet strength she had rarely seen in a leader. He did not command with fear or anger. He commanded with trust and respect, and the humans responded with loyalty, creativity, and courage. Hours passed. The enemy grew frustrated, their movements slower and more cautious. They had expected an easy victory, but instead found themselves trapped in a web of intelligence and strategy. Vela could see the cracks forming in their formation. Their confidence faltered, replaced with confusion and doubt. Finally, she saw an opportunity. Using the knowledge she had gathered from the enemy scouts, she signaled Jonas. The humans moved with precision, guiding the enemy into a narrow corridor she had prepared earlier. The walls were lined with loose rocks and dust, designed to collapse if pressure was applied. The enemy stepped into the corridor, and Vela gave the signal. The rocks tumbled, blocking their path and slowing their movement. They struggled to climb over, while the humans used their agility to create further distractions. The enemy's strength and advanced weapons were useless in the tight space. Vela moved through the shadows, guiding the humans, giving silent hand signals and anticipating each enemy action. She realized something profound. Humans fought not for glory, not for power, but for each other. Each trap, each movement, each distraction was not selfish. It was a team effort, a collective strategy to protect their home and each other. For the first time in years, Vela felt true admiration, not for herself, but for these humans. They were fragile, yes, and unarmed compared to the enemy. But they were smart, courageous, and united. They had turned their weakness into strength. And Vela realized that this, unity, intelligence, and determination, was more powerful than any weapon she had ever used. The enemy, exhausted and disoriented, finally retreated. Their sensors picked up no sign of Vela, and the humans had successfully concealed themselves. The fleet withdrew, frustrated and baffled by the ingenuity of a settlement they had underestimated. When the last ship disappeared over the horizon, Vela breathed a quiet sigh of relief. She looked at the humans, at Jonah's, and felt a deep sense of connection. They had done something incredible, not because they were stronger or faster, but because they were clever, brave, and united. Jonas approached her, a smile on his face. "We did it," he said simply. "Yes," Vela replied, her voice quiet but firm. "We did." That night the settlement celebrated quietly. There was no grand victory feast, no cheering, just a sense of relief, pride, and togetherness. The humans knew they had faced danger and overcome it, not through brute force, but through intelligence, courage, and cooperation. And Vela understood that she had been part of something extraordinary. She realized that the galaxy had hunted her for years, not because she was strong, but because she was feared. And yet here she had learned something even more important. True strength came not from fear, but from unity, ingenuity, and the willingness to fight for something greater than oneself. As she lay under the twin moons that night, Vela thought about the galaxy outside the settlement. There would always be danger, always be those who sought her. But for the first time, she knew that she was not alone. She had allies. She had friends. And she had a purpose beyond survival. And in that quiet moment, she made a silent vow. No matter what the galaxy sent next, she would protect this place. The night was dark, the twin moons casting long, silver shadows across the red-dusted settlement. Vela perched on a rocky ledge above the village, her eyes scanning the horizon. She had anticipated the arrival of the main fleet, but even with her experience, the size and precision of the force made her pause. Ships larger than anything she had faced before glimmered in the distance, engines humming like giant mechanical predators. She could feel the tension in the settlement below. Though the humans had survived the scouts' attack, they were not soldiers. They were farmers, engineers, children, and artisans, and yet under her guidance they had prepared themselves for this moment. Their clever traps and strategies had already proven effective, but this assault would be far more dangerous. The enemy would not retreat so easily this time. Jonas moved among the villagers, giving quiet instructions. He had learned from Vela's teachings how to use shadows, mislead enemies, and coordinate efforts. But more importantly, he had learned to inspire confidence. Each human under his guidance felt capable of contributing something essential, no matter their age or strength. The unity of the settlement was their greatest weapon, and tonight it would be tested. The enemy descended quickly, landing large craft at the edge of the settlement. Soldiers poured out, their weapons glowing faintly in the dim light. They scanned the area, expecting resistance, expecting fear. They would find neither. Vela moved through the shadows, signaling the humans. Small teams moved silently, leading enemy soldiers into narrow paths, pits, and distractions. Rocks tumbled, false noises misled sensors, and dust clouds created temporary cover. The humans had transformed their small village into a maze of traps and illusions. Every movement, every action was part of a larger plan. One group of attackers approached the water pump, unaware that it had been rigged with a simple pulley system. A small push sent the pump swinging, striking the soldiers and sending them scrambling backward. Vela watched from above, noting their reactions. They were skilled, but not as adaptable as the humans. The children and teenagers had learned to move in coordinated patterns, confusing and frustrating the enemy at every turn. A soldier raised a weapon to scan for life, but a cloud of sand thrown from above obscured his vision. Another child, hiding in the shadows with a small makeshift launcher, dropped a net over his sensors. The soldier froze, struggling to adjust, while the humans quietly moved to their next position. Vela felt a rush of pride. These humans were clever, courageous, and precise. They had turned fear into strategy, weakness into strength. Jonas approached her quietly, his eyes bright with determination. "We can keep this up," he said. "We know the terrain, we know the traps, we just have to stay coordinated." Vela nodded. And we will. They expect chaos, but they will find order, and that order will win. Hours passed, the battle of wits and movement continuing under the twin moons. The humans adapted quickly, responding to each threat with intelligence and creativity. Vela guided them from above, providing insight into enemy tactics and predicting movements. Each trap was more effective than the last, each distraction more precise. The attackers grew frustrated, their formations breaking apart, their confidence eroding. Then Vela spotted the enemy leader, a tall figure moving with calculated precision, directing the troops. This was no ordinary commander. He was skilled, experienced, and ruthless. She knew that if he identified her, the battle could turn against them. But she also knew that the humans had learned something essential, the power of teamwork, intelligence, and trust. She had to protect both herself and the settlement. Using a series of shadows and quick movements, she led a small team of humans behind the enemy lines. They moved silently, avoiding detection, and reached a vantage point where they could observe the leader's actions. Vela signaled to Jonas, who coordinated the next phase of the plan. "Distract him," she whispered. "Keep him busy while we guide the others." The humans sprang into action, creating diversions, leading small groups of soldiers into false corridors and pits. The enemy leader moved quickly, trying to regain control, but the humans anticipated his every move. They had learned to work as one, thinking ahead, predicting reactions, and staying calm under pressure. Vela watched, impressed. They were not just surviving, they were thriving. The humans were using their minds, their courage, and their unity to outmaneuver a superior force, and it was beautiful to see. As the battle continued, Vela realized that this was more than just defense. This was a lesson, not just for the humans, but for herself. The galaxy had taught her to rely on fear, on power, on skill alone. But these humans were teaching her something greater, that intelligence, creativity, and collaboration could overcome even the most dangerous odds. Suddenly, the enemy leader spotted her. His sensors focused, and he moved quickly toward her position. Vela tensed, ready to move, but Jonas acted first. Using a combination of lights and shadows, he created a false reflection of her image. The enemy commander aimed at the illusion, while Vela slipped to another vantage point unnoticed. The humans continued their coordinated attacks, leading soldiers into traps and distractions, frustrating the enemy at every turn. One team used mirrors and reflective surfaces to create the illusion of movement, making the attackers think they were surrounded. Another team used dust and wind to mask their positions, appearing and disappearing like ghosts. Vela guided them through each step, her mind calculating the next move, anticipating every reaction. She had never worked with a team like this before. She had never seen humans operate with such precision, courage, and intelligence. They were brilliant, and they were united. And together they were unstoppable. The enemy soldiers, exhausted and disoriented, began to retreat. Their leader tried to regroup, but the humans had anticipated this as well. Vela signaled Jonas, who directed a final maneuver. Using the terrain and the traps, they funneled the enemy into a narrow canyon, where movement was restricted, and the humans' agility and planning gave them the advantage. The enemy leader realized too late that he had been outsmarted. The humans, guided by Vela, had turned their village into a fortress not of walls and weapons, but of intelligence, creativity, and unity. The soldiers were forced to retreat, leaving the settlement untouched. As the last of the enemy ships disappeared into the horizon, Vela breathed a deep sigh of relief. She looked at the humans around her, tired but victorious. They had faced a force far stronger than themselves and had succeeded, not through power, not through fear, but through intelligence, courage, and cooperation. Jonas approached her, his expression calm but proud. "You see," he said, "we can face anything if we work together." Vela nodded, a rare smile crossing her face. "Yes," she replied, "you are stronger than you know, not because of weapons or strength, but because of who you are. Together you are unstoppable." That night the settlement celebrated quietly. There were no grand parades or fireworks, just the satisfaction of survival and the knowledge that they had overcome impossible odds. The humans shared food, stories, and laughter, but more importantly, they shared trust. They had learned to rely on each other, to believe in each other, and to act as one. Vela watched from a distance, feeling something she had never felt before. She was no longer just a survivor. She was part of something greater. She had found a place where her skills could be used not for fear or death, but for protection and unity. The twin moons rose high in the sky, casting silver light over the settlement. Vela knew the galaxy was still full of danger, still full of those who would hunt her. But she also knew that she was not alone. She had allies, friends, and a home worth defending. And she had learned a lesson she would never forget. True strength did not come from fear or skill alone. It came from courage, intelligence, and the willingness to fight for something greater than oneself. As she stood on the rocky ledge, looking down at the humans she had come to admire, Vela felt a sense of peace. The galaxy might still hunt her, but here, in this small settlement on a dusty planet, she had found something no enemy could take away: trust, belonging, and the knowledge that even the smallest humans could achieve greatness when they worked together. And in that quiet moment, Vela made a silent vow. No matter what came next, she would protect this home, these people, and the strength they had shown together. The stars above twinkled like distant promises, and Vela understood that this was only the beginning. The galaxy could send its hunters, its enemies, and its challenges. But the humans had shown her that they could face anything, because their greatest weapon was not fear, not firepower, but the courage, intelligence, and unity that made them truly unstoppable. And for the first time in her long, dangerous life, Vela felt that perhaps, just perhaps, she had finally found a place where she belonged. The red dust of the settlement had barely settled from the night of battle, but there was no rest for anyone, not for Vela and not for the humans she had come to protect. Though the enemy had retreated, the galaxy was full of hunters, spies, and mercenaries. Vela knew it would only be a matter of time before someone returned to claim the reward on her head. But unlike before, she did not feel alone, and she did not feel fear. She walked through the streets of the settlement early that morning, observing the humans repairing the damage from the skirmish. Broken walls had been patched, traps reset, and fields cleared. The humans moved efficiently, calmly, and with an almost cheerful energy that she found impossible to ignore. They worked together not because they had to, but because they wanted to protect each other. Jonas approached her, carrying a basket of tools. "We should reinforce the perimeter," he said simply. "We've survived the first attack, but we can't rely on luck twice." Vela nodded. "Agreed, but this time we won't just defend, we will prepare to surprise them if they return." Over the next few days, Vela and the humans worked tirelessly. They strengthened existing traps, added new ones, and created safe zones for the children and the elderly. They used clever tactics to conceal the settlement's true strength. Rocks, dust, and simple structures became tools for misdirection. Even the children helped, placing small decoys and signaling warning patterns that she had taught them. It amazed her how quickly they adapted. Humans had a kind of intelligence that was unpredictable, flexible, and resourceful. She had faced countless enemies across the galaxy, trained in countless strategies, but these humans, simple, ordinary humans, could think in ways that machines, soldiers, and mercenaries could not. She began to understand that their greatest strength was not in weapons or technology, but in their minds, their courage, and their unity. One afternoon, Vela and Jonas stood on a ridge overlooking the settlement. The wind blew gently, carrying the red dust across the plains. "Do you ever wonder why they keep coming for you?" Jonas asked. Vela's eyes narrowed. "Because I am feared, because I am skilled, because I have survived when others could not. That is enough reason for the galaxy to hunt me." Jonas nodded thoughtfully. "And yet here you are. Alive, not running, protecting people who trusted you without knowing who you are. You're not just surviving anymore, you're building something." Vela looked down at the settlement, at the humans moving among the traps and workshops, at the children laughing as they carried buckets of water, and at Jonas, calm and confident beside her. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not filled with running, hiding, and fighting. She imagined a place where she belonged, where she was not just an assassin, but a guardian. That evening, scouts reported a fleet approaching from the far edge of the system. This was the main force, larger and more organized than any they had faced before. Vela did not panic. She called a meeting with Jonas and the adult defenders, laying out a new strategy. "This is not just about defense," she said. "We will not wait for them to make mistakes. We will guide them, mislead them, and force them into positions where they cannot fight effectively. Every movement, every action, every decision will be ours. We will turn their strength against them." The humans listened, absorbed every detail, and added their own ideas. One man suggested using the wind and dust to hide their positions. Another suggested setting up mirrored surfaces to confuse scanners. A small group of children, inspired by Vela's training, created tiny mechanical decoys that could move across the open areas, drawing attention and leaving false signals. As night fell, the enemy fleet arrived, scanning for life signs. They expected resistance, but not like this. They were prepared for force, not for intelligence. Vela and the humans had transformed the settlement into a living puzzle. Every street, every rock, every shadow was part of a plan. The battle began quietly. The enemy moved cautiously, stepping into paths that had been carefully prepared. Dust clouds hid movement, decoys drew attention, and the humans appeared and disappeared like shadows. Vela guided them from the high ground, signaling when to move, when to distract, and when to retreat. The enemy commander, the same one who had led the previous attack, quickly realized that his usual tactics were ineffective. He had expected fear and chaos, but instead found calm, clever opponents who anticipated his every move. Frustration grew among the ranks, and his confidence faltered. The humans, working together, led the enemy into the final trap, a narrow canyon at the edge of the settlement. Here, movement was restricted, and their ingenuity could shine. Rocks, wires, and dust created obstacles that slowed the enemy, forcing them to act cautiously. Vela and the humans used every advantage, guiding the enemy's steps and predicting every action. The enemy leader realized too late that he had been outsmarted. The canyon, the shadows, the decoys, all were designed to limit his options and maximize the human's strengths. One by one, his soldiers were forced to retreat, unable to navigate the clever obstacles. Their fleet, confused and frustrated, began to withdraw. When the last ship disappeared into the distance, silence fell over the settlement. The humans had done it. They had faced overwhelming odds and survived. Not through brute strength, not through fear, but through intelligence, cooperation, and courage. Vela walked among them, observing their expressions. They were tired but proud. They had done something extraordinary. And for the first time, she realized that her skills, her speed, her intelligence, her knowledge of tactics were not tools for fear or death. They could be used to protect, to guide, and to create safety. Jonas approached her, smiling. "You see," he said quietly. "We did this together, you and us. We protected our home not because we were stronger, but because we worked as one." Vela nodded, feeling a warmth she had never known. "Yes," she replied, "and we will continue to do so. No matter what the galaxy sends next, we will protect this place." The next morning, the settlement began the slow process of rebuilding and strengthening. Vela taught the humans new strategies, refining the traps and defenses, and training them to anticipate future threats. But more importantly, she began to teach them confidence, the understanding that their minds, their courage, and their unity could overcome anything. The humans, in turn, taught her about community, trust, and belonging. They invited her into their homes, shared meals with her, and included her in celebrations. For someone who had spent years in isolation, always wary of betrayal, it was a strange and wonderful experience. She felt connected, valued, and most surprisingly, safe. Children laughed as they ran past her, showing her small creations and inventions. Adults shared stories of past challenges and triumphs. Even the elders, who had seen more danger than most, welcomed her without hesitation. Vela realized that this acceptance was something she had never experienced. She had always been alone, feared, and hunted. Now she had a place where she belonged. One evening, as the twin moons rose high in the sky, Jonas and Vela walked to the top of the ridge overlooking the settlement. The village glowed softly under the moonlight, a symbol of resilience, courage, and unity. "You've changed everything here," Jonas said. "You've taught us to be brave, to think, and to work together, and in return, we've shown you something too." Vela looked at him, the humans below, and finally allowed herself to speak fully. "You've shown me what it means to belong, to trust, to protect without fear. To fight not for myself, but for something greater. I thought I had lost that long ago, but you've given it back to me." Jonas smiled. "Then stay, this is your home too." For the first time, Vela felt a sense of permanence. She was no longer a hunted assassin, no longer a shadow moving alone through the galaxy. She was a guardian, a mentor, a part of something greater than herself. In the following weeks, the settlement continued to thrive. The humans learned from Vela's experience. combining her tactics with their ingenuity to create a system of defenses that could withstand any future attack. Vela, in turn, learned from them, not just about strategy, but about life, trust, and the power of human spirit. And while the galaxy outside remained vast and dangerous, Vela no longer feared it. She had found allies, friends, and a home worth defending. The humans had proven that intelligence, unity, and courage could overcome even the most formidable foes. As she stood on the ridge one last time, watching the sun rise over the red horizon, Vela understood something profound. Humanity's greatest power was not in weapons or strength, but in their hearts, their minds, and their ability to work together. And now she was part of that power. The galaxy might still have dangers, still have hunters and enemies. But here, on this small, dusty planet, Vela had found what she had never believed possible: safety, belonging, and a family that accepted her as she was. She smiled quietly to herself, a rare, genuine smile. The galaxy might have feared her once, but now she had something far stronger than fear: trust, friendship, and home. And for the first time in her life, Vela felt truly free.